Hi everyone, welcome to your final review. Okay, now before we get into this, some very important information. Okay, now the ACS final is traditionally classed as being hard or difficult by students. Okay, and the students that say that are the ones that don't prepare for the final. Okay, my kind of take on it is it's not so hard, it's just different. Okay, the ACS really pride themselves on the way they ask interesting and novel questions. It's testing the theory you know, but it's just asked in a very strange, sometimes, way. So if you're the kind of person that can kind of read between the lines a little bit, you'll do very well on this test. If you're kind of more of a memorization method kind of person, it's probably going to be a bit tougher, okay? But don't worry too much about it, because you can kind of get a good score on this test just through practice, okay? They do technically, have a bank of questions which then, appear. So there's, loads of questions and you'll get a bank. So the more you practice, the better you get. And I really advise getting a hold of the ACS study guide if you want to do well on the final. And remember what I said, a couple of you have asked, how's my grade? Well, my reply is whatever grade you get for the final is usually the grade you get for the course. It is curved, okay, but the better you do on that final, that can kind of guarantee a really good grade for the course. So if you're worried about your final grade, you can knock it out of the park if you do well in the final. Do well in the final by doing as many questions as you can from the study guide. I'm going to go through as many as I kind of can without, infringing any copyright laws or anything, right? So I'll show you a few kind of practice examples and a few good honest tips for that final. All right, so here we are then. So I've got my last review packet here, okay? Hopefully you're able to download this, print it would be ideal, okay? And then you can kind of work through the questions with me. I'll give you time to work the question, I'll provide an answer, okay? That kind of thing. All right, so let's take a look at it. So final exam tips and review, okay? Now the first one is ions, okay? If you remember, I kind of gave you a list of about 30 ions to learn, okay? That's what I used in the course. However, there are obviously more ions than that in nature, okay? So they do ask you to know a few more, but if we just memorize the ions, or just a memorizing ions course, that would be it, okay, because there's thousands. So a trick is to kind of memorize the sequence of names, if you like, okay? So if you look here, we know, for example, chloride, bromide, iodide, fluoride, just the molecular ion has, just an atomic ion, chloride, atom of chlorine with a minus charge, chloride, has an IDE ending, okay? And if I throw loads of oxygens on there, sulfate, phosphate, carbonate, things like that, it's an 8 on the end. So we kind of looked at the top and the tail a little bit, okay? Ides, no oxygen, 8s, lots of oxygen, fair enough. But there is stuff in between, okay? So if you add 1 oxygen, it's hypoite, 2, ite, 3, 8, sometimes that's 4, phosphate, sulfate. And then if you put one more than you should really, all right, it's per 8. Okay, so a nice neat trick is just to kind of, unfortunately it's a bit of memorization. If you just memorize ide, hypoite, ite, 8, and per 8, that gives you the, what we call homologous series for any atom, right? So it could be chlorine, bromine, iodine, sulfur, whatever it was, right? It's going to have these starts and endings depending on how many oxygen it has, okay? And that kind of brings me to the first question. So I'll talk more about it in a moment. It's a multiple choice test, okay? So question might read, lithium chlorite has the following formula. Oh, you remember the series. Ite was 2, so it's C, right? Okay, that's the chlorite, that's the chlorite, okay? So some easy points. There's literally going to be 1 or 2 of those on your test, all right? Now, next one, solubility. If you remember, I did give you some solubility rules, all right? I actually gave you more information than they technically require. Oh, pardon me. Okay, so I gave you the solubility chart. Bad news, no solubility chart. Good news, you only have to remember a couple of things from the chart, and they relate kind of to lab, okay? So if we look down here, all chlorides, as we know, are soluble. If you remember that one lab, the chloride group lab, silver, mercury, and lead are not, okay? So silver, mercury, lead, chloride compounds are solids, everything else is aqueous. Similarly for sulfate compounds, similar, but swap lead for barium, sorry, swap silver for barium. So barium, mercury and lead sulfate are solids, everything else is aqueous, okay? So that's the only two kind of ionic solubility rules you need to know. If you want to keep it real simple, silver chloride is a solid, everything else is aqueous. They generally don't ask about lead or mercury, but they might. I've seen it once or twice, all right? Generally speaking, the lab tests for sulfate is making barium sulfate as a precipitate, so barium sulfate is a solid. So is lead and mercury, okay? So that's a commonality they have. Okay, so use that information to answer questions about solubility. Okay, all right, now the final exam itself. Talked about it a little bit. So here's some information on the exam, right? So it's a standardized test. Now, a little bit different than the regular semester. You can't actually go back to questions you've answered. If you look at what it said online, the questions are provided to you one at a time randomly, okay? And then once you've answered that question, it's gone forever. You go on to the next one, okay? So that's a bit of a problem. It's a 2-hour test with 70 questions. So you've got to be like between 1 and 2 minutes per question, right? So if it's a super hard one that's going to take a long time, my advice is to skip it, okay? Try and make the most bang for the buck, okay? If you're there for 3 or 4 minutes looking at a question, it's time to move on, okay? All right, so 70 questions, multiple choice, A through D, nothing taken off for wrong answer. So if you're really short for time, best guess, Mr. Zulu. Right? Okay, Star Trek. All right, now, so obviously, there's multiple versions of the test because it's computerized. Okay, so I take your score out of 70, turn it into a score out of 200, multiplied by 2.86 or something, whatever the number is, and that goes in your grade scheme. And honestly, because it's kind of all computerized, I get the answers, your score, almost right away. So pretty soon after you take your test, the grades will be up. Okay, so look within 12 hours for the grades. Okay, now, as you mentioned, a great way to practice is with as mentioned in the pre-lab for the last lab, is with the ACS guide. I really suggest you get that. Don't go to the official site, just go on eBay, anywhere online. You can get it for $10, right? Doesn't matter if it's a used copy, it's all the same. All right. Now there's the 101 and 102 syllabi, so make sure you just answer questions that look familiar. If it's not familiar, it's 102, okay? All right. Now, here are some great tips for passing a multiple choice test. This is how I always pass my driving test with a 98, right? So there are ways you can kind of perform a multiple choice test to your advantage. Most of you know this, but let's take a look. Okay, so if you like, you've got like a minute and a half to do each question, so you're not going to get a whole slides and ladders, right? So don't have that in your head. Those are more kind of, I give you 5 questions on a midterm, right? Here you got 70 questions in the same amount of time, so it's kind of much lighter, much easier, if you like, version of what I do. So it might be like one ladder in the slides and ladders, or one slide in the slides and ladders, not the whole big thing, okay? So think of these for what they are. They're kind of shorter, lighter versions of what I've taught you. My whole idea with the harder exam questions I teach you is to kind of overtrain you a little bit, right? So then if you can kind of get that in your head, I don't have to do the whole thing, just be able to recognize which part they've taken and answer it, okay? So test is cumulative. Everything since day 1 in here will be covered. Students, you'll be careful, right? So students, particularly in a long 16-week course, they forget what happened at the start. So element, mixture, and compound is worth just the same as percent yield, right? So that harder stuff at the end is worth the same as the easy stuff. So students often kick themselves when they come out of a test, on campus, because they miss the easy ones because they forgot the easy stuff from the first few weeks. So review the whole 16 weeks, okay? All right, so I said it there. So review all the topics. Do not fall into the trap of, making yourself feel good, right? So people will practice things they're good at to make themselves feel good. Don't do that. Practice things you're bad at, okay? The whole idea is you maximize your score, right? Okay. Now, this is kind of more of a paper and pencil tip, right? Answer the questions in order. You're going to do that anyway, okay? So that doesn't really apply, okay? Answer them on scratch paper. Yeah, you're going to have a bit of scratch paper next to you, right? So you're going to be presented with A, B, C, and D. My advice is do not look at the answer provided if possible, right? I think online, maybe you've got no choice, but you know, you can kind of reveal the answers when you're doing this, you know, paper and pencil. My advice is don't reveal the answers, work it out on the side and then look. If you get a match, it's right. Okay, that's a nice little tip. Okay, look out for obvious red herrings. The answers they provide, 1 right and 3 wrong. The wrong answers aren't random, right? They're there to trip you up sometimes, okay? So here's a classic red herring right down here as an example, right? So if you read that in a hurry, CO is a formula for, you just look in the periodic table, CO cobalt. Right? But no, right? Oh, copper, that starts with CNO. No, obviously it's carbon monoxide. There's a classic error there, monocarbon. So it's B is the answer. All right, so what I've got a bunch of practice questions, as many as I could kind of borrow without getting in trouble. Okay, so you can look through. Okay, the answers are provided. Okay, so if you go all the way to the end, the answers are provided. Okay, so my advice is pause me. Okay, stop me talking. Right, try them, and then unpause me, and I'll just go through the answer. Well, I'll go through how to solve them because the answers are there, aren't they? Okay, so go solve them. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, back. So, first one, hopefully, you know, there are some very simple questions on this test. It's General Chemistry 1, right? Okay, so all neutral atoms, keyword, there are equal numbers of things with opposite charge, right? Equal numbers of plus and minus, electrons, and protons. So the answer would be A, all right. Which pairs of particles have the same number of electrons? Well, you need your periodic table for that, okay? I don't have my periodic table with me. So I'll just, you know, with the magic of editing, I'll be right back, okay? All right, so here it is, right? So you got a bunch of candidates, yeah? So the nice trick is if it's like magnesium plus 2, it's the magnesium position in the periodic table. You know, minus 2 electrons gives it the neon configuration, right? That makes sense because magnesium plus 2 is a positive ion for plus 2 because it's, take 2 away, it's inert core, right? So neon, so magnesium 2 plus looks like neon. F minus, if I add an electron, it looks like neon. So the actual answer is A. Let's confirm a few of the others aren't right. Neon, argon, obviously they're different elements. So that's one layer down, extra layer of electrons. P3 minus and Al3 plus. So P3 minus turns it into argon, right? And aluminum 3 plus turns it into neon, so that's not right. Bromine minus and selenium, there they are. So bromine minus is krypton, selenium, selenium. So the answer is A. Okay, so 2 A's so far, right? I'm keeping track here. All right. Number 3, well, you just got to run the math on that. If you remember the Dr. Phil example, let me move it up for you. Okay, so remember, a molecule is the sum of its parts, a compound is the sum of its parts. So percent oxygen would be 3 times the oxygen mass, 16, 3 times 16 divided by the molecular weight of the whole thing, times 100 for a percent. Okay? Next one. Oh, an easy one, right? Okay. So if you think about it, this is interesting, right? So the numbers, interestingly, the numbers in the test are usually easy numbers because we don't want you spending lots of time on your calculator. If you get the concept, which is the ACS philosophy, you're okay, right? So I know from the periodic table, 1 mole of carbon weighs 12 grams, right? So therefore, 24 grams of carbon, you guessed it, 2 moles, right? 1 mole is 12, 24 is 2 moles, right? So therefore, I need 2 moles of atoms, which is 12 times 10 to the 23, or B, 12 times 10 to the 24. Well, sorry, 1.2 times 10 to the 24. Okay. All right. Next one. Now, next one, a little trickier, right? Remember when I said, you know, if the question takes more than 4 minutes or so, let's go to the next one. This one takes more than 4 minutes. I will show you the technique though, right? Okay. So a metallic oxide, now these are all +1 ions, right? If you look at the formula. So X2O turns into its metal plus O. Now, you know, I'm using an unbalanced equation, that's okay, right? Okay. When that many grams, 1.187 grams, is reduced, reacted, it turns into 1.054, right? And then the difference is obviously oxygen, right? So they're testing the conservation of mass, right? 1.184 minus 1.054 equals 0.13. Okay, there you go. Oh, slight mess up on the math there. 1.187 minus 1.05433. Okay, so this is really hard to do conceptually, right? So here's the trick, right? It's the slides and ladders modification. So I want, for the identity of this metal, what's the metallic oxide, right? So if I know the metal, I know the answer, right? So I want the molecular weight of the metal, yeah? If you think about it, one of these and two of these are stoichiometrically related. So the molecular weight of oxygen atoms is 16. Divided to go down, what do I get? 8.31 times 10 to the minus 3 moles. So over here, twice as much. I'll do it as a decimal. Now, there. What's the molecular weight? Molecular weight is grams over moles, right? So the grams divided by the moles is the molecular weight. So 1.054 divided by 0.0166 equals 63. If I look in the periodic table, that's the mass of copper. Copper. See you. Copper. Okay, so there it is. All right, where are you, copper? There you are. 63.5. Okay, so the answer is copper. B. All right, that's a little bit of a tricky one. You know, if it's a regular semester, I'll tell the students come back to that at the end if you got time. But I think for this particular test, if you're 3 minutes in and it's still a mystery, next question. Don't get stubborn. Don't just sit there and I'm sitting here until I solve it, because that will give you a very low score. It's a timed test. If you run out of time with 10 questions to go, it's a score out of 60, isn't it? Not out of 70, so be careful. All right, next one. Oh, interesting. A single molecule weighs that, right? So if I go over here, what's the conversion? 1 molecule equals 3.4 times 10 to the minus 22 grams. Therefore, 1 mole of molecules equals 3.4 times 10 to the minus 22 grams per 1 molecule times 6.02 times 10 to the 23 molecules per 1 mole, right? So you're just basically multiplying that by the Avogadro number, right? And that gives you the moles, and then multiply it out. Sorry, that gives you the mass of a mole, and that is the definition of molecular weight. Okay, so let's just knock that out quick, right? So, actually, it's, you can do it, right? The answer's in the back. All right. Next one. Electronic structure should be pretty easy. Remember the trick, calcium, right? Remember the way the periodic table works? This is the S block. Right. Calcium is 1, 2, 3, 4th row, so this terminal electron is 4s2. That's the last electron that goes in is 4s2, right, if I read across. So just look for the structure with 4s2 in the end. It's C, right? It's C. All right. Okay. Finally, 2 moles of any gas will occupy, hey, 22.4 is 1, 44.8 is 2. All right, so there we go. So those are the answers. Hopefully that makes sense, okay? Now, last but not least, wrap up. Kind of mentioned it already, okay? I get your scores exactly, well, sorry, I get your scores in as quick as the computer will do it, okay? And I'll get them up as soon as I humanly can, okay? So a couple of hours after the deadline, I'll probably have your grade, okay? Now, you can, you know, look at the scores on Canvas. Canvas is, you know, since I wrote this, Canvas was not a thing back then. So since then, all the scores are up, right? So you can just look at your grades on Canvas. It should all make sense, okay? But if it doesn't make sense, just send me an email. Now, normally I do like this password thing because, you know, privacy. But if you send from your Canvas account, so in this case, if you do have a question, that's when you'll use Canvas, because only you can log into Canvas, so I know it's you, right? There's no FERPA stuff, right? If it's like, you know, English guy at Yahoo, I mean, who the hell's that? Yeah, so, you know, because it's your personal email in Canvas, I know it's you. So any questions about the grade and you're not really understanding what happened, how the thing was graded perhaps, you know, yeah, send me a quick email. All right. Now this doesn't apply in the regular semester. We have more time, and I give students like literally a 25 point. You know, if you're within just a percent or two of the passing grade, right? So say the passing grade is 55%, right? Let's say you get 54.2%. Technically a D, right? But you know, it's not. If you're close, I'll give you a chance, right? So I'm going to send you a kind of a fun kind of quiz. You would go to Barnes & Noble and read a chapter out of a book, but with the COVID, no Barnes & Noble probably, right? So I'm just going to lower the line to 53, okay? So to pass the course, it's 53 or better, okay? 52.9 is failing. 53 or better is passing, right, with a C. And then, you know, C, B, and A, the lines between A and B and C and B, A and B, B and C, you know, they're curved, right? And it's usually, well, you have to look at the numbers, but typically the AB line is around 84 to 86%, and the BC line is often as low as 76-ish. Okay, it depends. You know, I will look at old results and kind of follow that kind of pattern. Okay, all right. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions? Discussion. Okay, so see you guys next time.